Okay, so looks like I'm right on the dot here. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, if you're just joining us, please go ahead and mute your mics for now. If you do have any questions, you can unmute your mics. We will leave time for Q&A at the end of the session, but you can also type in your questions in the chat box as we have always done. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce our two speakers today. We have Todd Smith and John Brattlof, and they're both safety directors in Austin, Texas. Combined, they bring over 40 years of experience in construction safety. Todd and John are frequent speakers in the national conferences such as ASSP, EHS, Hanson Wade, and many others. Together they founded the Central Texas chapter of the ASSP Construction Practice Specialty Group and are co-chairman of the OSHA partnership with the Associated Builders and Contractors of Central Texas. John and Todd have also co-authored a book titled Symbiotic Safety, Safety and Operations Work Better Together. And if you're interested in a copy, you can reach out to me afterwards and I can organize getting that for you. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to John and Todd.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie. My name is John Brattlof.
And I'm Todd Smith.
And we're very, very happy to be here today with you. Just looking forward to just kind of going through and talking about leading beyond compliance-based safety. We have several topics that we want to go over today in our agenda, and I'll show you what those are. First is that in order to get to leading beyond compliance-based safety, we have to not consider ourselves in a role of being an ambassador for OSHA. OSHA is incredibly important, and we're going to spend some time talking about them, but compliance-based safety limits us to what OSHA says, and we want to get much, much bigger than just what OSHA has to say about it. We're also going to talk about the need that safety must facilitate commitment instead of just compliance. And we're going to talk about how to set up that commitment, that safety culture that gets buy-in at all levels. And in order to do that, it's going to have some extreme leadership. And we're going to talk about the leadership skills that are needed in order to get that buy-in at all level. And then we're going to have a quick discussion about the term that we coined symbiotic safety, which is that safety and operations work better together, and how the relationship that operations and safety have towards excellence. So with all of that, I'm going to turn over and let Todd explain to us about the process of not just being an ambassador for OSHA.
Well, I want to first talk about how a safety professional mentioned in this presentation really has to do with everyone on a job site. We're all safety professionals. Now, the role of the safety professional, or safety in general, is changing. And though we started with a compliance-based approach, which I'm going to talk about, we're going to try to go beyond that and create some engagement from everyone who's on a job site. When we think about the traditional compliance-based approach, we think about hazard control. This is OSHA's primary focus. Do you have good hazard control? Are you in compliance in the sense that you're following all the rules in 1910 and 1926? These rules were established based on standards, common practices, common sense practices, if you will, and are supposed to be incorporated into your safety policy. That policy is supposed to reflect what's going on in the field. And when OSHA comes to do a job site inspection, that safety policy needs to indicate what's going on in the field, ideally. So OSHA is first going to take a look at that policy and make sure you're doing what you say you're supposed to be doing according to your own policy. And then we're always trying to avoid citations. Sometimes we get locked into a narrow definition of safety. Are we getting citations? Do we have accidents? OSHA doesn't even call them accidents. OSHA calls them incidents because they're preventable. Are we avoiding any negative audit results on our own internal safety audits, job walks? Are we finding things that shouldn't be there? Are those successful, and are we giving an objective scrutiny to the job site? Sometimes we're asked to interpret OSHA-E's, and I find that people tend to kind of fall into two categories here: the I know OSHA, I speak OSHA, or total mystification, don't understand anything about this. This is not approachable by the common person. And of course, it's somewhere in between. But we're asked things like, what does OSHA say about this? Are we in compliance? Which means, are we following the rules? What can the owners, general contractors make us do this? And really, I would like to see all of us engaged in safety and asking the question, should we be doing this? Can we do better? Is there a better way? And I had a recent accident where this came up 2 weeks ago. Next, please, John. And the worker was working in a elevator shaft and just started work. We'd done the JHA. I'd walked the job site. The general contractor had walked the job site, and a hammer drill fell from the 15th floor and broke his arm. He could have died. He could have been missed. Could have been a near miss, but he had a severely broken arm, both bones, and we were told by OSHA because it's a hospitalization, we had to do a rapid response investigation, came up with the 5-point safety plan, posted it at the job trailer of the general contractor, had our meeting. Because of our cold and issues here in Texas, we couldn't get back to work until this morning. And those 5 points were having a monitor walking up and down, ensure people that they weren't working. Inspection of the scaffold, the swing stage scaffold. We were fire taping in an elevator shaft. That we get to see the job site before we start. That the posting was done to tell all the other trades we would be working in the stairwell. Showed up this morning, told everything's working, walked to the 15th floor. The 15th floor is covered up. All the other floors were covered up. I get down to the 13th floor. The sheet rockers are working. They weren't supposed to be there. I say, get those guys out of here, please. That was the plan. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Then we get down to the floor where we're supposed to start working, and I asked for the inspection. And I get a lot of shoulder shrugging and calling the trailer and talking from this superintendent to that one to the assistant. And oh, the inspector came out, but he didn't complete the inspection. So I say, okay, send me the inspection, we'll bring our guys back. That's a level that we have to be able to show in good times and in bad. I mean, obviously that would, if that guy would have had a near miss, would we have had the same intensity and scrutinized the situation? I can't say. I would like to think we would look at it that way, but it's not always going to be good. And sometimes it's going to be a concerning situation. Other times you actually have to deal with an injury or a fatality. Next, please. So the role of safety has changed. Yes, we have to understand the standards and explain them, but that's not our only purpose. It's an expanded role, and that's good. We had an opportunity to expand our contributions to operations, to the construction process with COVID-19. All our general contractors that we worked with here in Texas were doing a very good job of following the COVID protocol from the beginning. I ended up with 13 out of 120 workers getting COVID in June and could not figure out what the problem was. Hand sanitizer, social distancing, masks. We had everything in place, and we just came to the conclusion that it was happening at home. So I had a letter that I wrote to the families in Spanish. All my workers speak Spanish. Mothers, wives, children, please help keep your father safe, and he's at home. No incidents since. The owners and workers in our company are engaged, and that's important. Why? Because we run the risk, even of doing a good job and being proactive and engaged, of becoming kind of blind to change. So we want to avoid that blindness to change. And what does that mean? Just understanding that checking all the boxes and doing everything that you're supposed to do doesn't mean that that's enough. OSHA wants a best practice approach. This is complete engagement, and we just keep hitting on that point. But if everyone's not involved, you can't just have a safe job site when the safety professional comes or after a safety meeting. and then everybody else just kind of lets it go when they see violations. So we want people to be proactive. I want to talk to you a little bit about this OSHA demystification. They're the first ones to admit they are understaffed. They're the bare minimum. Those standards, practices have been put in place from 1970 and before. They update, but they're very slow and they're outdated. So this is just a starting point. Complying with OSHA and compliance in general is just supposed to be the start of a safety culture. It's just the beginning. OSHA has to focus on recordable injuries. Is it possible, if we have no recordable injuries, are we safe? That's not necessarily the case. All the lagging indicators can be manipulated, and they really don't focus on a proactive safety culture. OSHA had to be very focused on working conditions and training documentation. So I'd prefer you to see OSHA as a valuable resource, limited, but important. That resource is a proven set of common sense practices that promotes a best practice approach. Here's what you have to do to not get a ticket, get a fine, get in trouble. And here's what you should do to go beyond that when it's possible, economically, and feasible from a time standpoint. Give safety a role in bidding and planning. Provide training using JHAs, not just burning up papers. Designating competent persons, and really important, periodic policy review, making changes to your policies where there's areas of concern or injury trends. A safety culture has to be more than just compliance. It has to be something more, and that's commitment. And John's going to talk about that a little bit.
Thanks, Todd. To talk about moving beyond compliance, we got to start talking about the concept of commitment. And like this little icon shows, obviously the pig has a lot more commitment to providing for breakfast than the chicken does. Because being committed to something is meaning a lot more than compliance. When we are just focusing on compliance, it's kind of a binary system where we look at checking a box, is this correct or is it incorrect? But very few of the accidents actually happen because of a lack of compliance. They're usually another process, whether it's mental, whether it's they forgot, whether it's they didn't see this coming, whatever happens. So we want to look at compliance as just a strategy of a safe job site. But strategies are not the goal. And it's kind of like, I like to watch, you'll find out in this presentation, I like to watch football, and I think it's a great microcosm of life. But in football, an offense that can move the ball and rack up a bunch of yards doesn't necessarily always win the game. It's a great idea, and you got to get first downs, and you got to keep moving the ball. But you only win when you score touchdowns. And so the actual goal is to cross the goal line and to finish. And so when you talk about a strategy of being OSHA compliant or being compliant with your company safety plans and your safety policies, and maybe it's the owner that you're working for, the facility, or the Corps of Engineers, or whoever it is that's setting the compliance strategy. Again, that's only a means to get to the goal. The focus on compliance sometimes will also limit our focus on accident prevention, because we've only got a certain amount of time in the day, and we've only got a certain amount of mental acuity that we can focus on something. And every time that we focus on compliance, it's very easy to miss the big picture because we're so focused on the minute details of what goes on. I don't think that you can be out of compliance and be safe, but I do believe that you can be compliant with the rules and still be unsafe, because there's so many more factors that go into that. And so I just want to continue to bring on the concept that compliance is just a mere strategy. What we're trying to get to is a culture of buy-in from all levels. And when you talk about employees at any organization, you've got different levels, you've got different job titles, you've got different responsibilities that they do. But all of them are going to have somewhat intersecting priorities and goals and motivators and fears, but for the most part, they're also going to have a lot of different priorities and a lot of different goals. And so when you talk about executive leadership, you have to look at them and say, what do they really want? What are their motivators? What are they afraid of? No one in executive leadership wants to be in charge of an organization that has a lot of people getting hurt and a lot of people or anybody getting killed. That's not a fun place to be when under your watch people are suffering. But also it's not good to be an executive leader when they're running out of cash, or if they're not getting any future work, or so there's a whole litany of different things that executive leadership has to balance and make sure that it works. The same thing with managers. Managers may look at it, and this is where it gets a little bit more complex. A lot of times managers are held accountable for the results of their particular project or their particular unit or their particular group. And so what do they really want? They want their particular group to succeed. They want it to be successful on all levels. But what motivates each individual person? Motivating people is different. Every single person I've ever met has different things that they're excited about, different things that motivate them. But then another thing that we don't talk about very much is, what are they afraid of? And I think you would really be shocked to find out how many decisions are made based upon fear. The fear of me getting embarrassed, the fear of me making a wrong decision and everybody knowing about it, the fear of me being a failure, the fear of something that's happening. A safety culture has to really understand that these three questions are going to drive a safety culture. What do they really want? What are their motivators? And what are they afraid of? And they're going to be different at all levels. And so we have to spend a lot of time looking at all of those levels to see which one of those do we need to spend more time and focus on? Because if we're just looking at compliance of whether or not we check the box on a safety audit, whether that's from OSHA, whether that's internal or from our customer or anybody else, we're never ever looking at these three questions. What do people really want? What motivates them? And what are they afraid of? So in order to really dig down into this culture of finding out how to get this buy-in, we're going to have an extreme amount of leadership. And Todd's going to go through real quick and talk to us about some steps of how to get great leadership.
Well, leadership is kind of a popular topic right now. Everybody's talking about leadership in books, classes, in whatever kind of training. But what it really boils down to is just one word, that's influence. How do we influence people to change their behavior? And that's complicated, certainly not through intimidation and threats and complaints and fear. We have to create a supportive environment where people are engaged. They feel like they're being mentored and coached, not just breaking rules. And then if everything is safe, we just kind of shrug our shoulders and walk away. Next, please. So Simon Sinek has created this book, and it was kind of interesting. He talks about inviting people into the safety circle. Safety circle is just a metaphor for communication, trust, support, coaching. How do we become influential for our workers? We are going to be better listeners. We're going to be supportive. We're going to appreciate their contributions. We're going to seek out ideas from the team and appreciate everybody's efforts to contribute. And that's easier said than done. We kind of have some bad habits, and there are lots of people who come from the old school of leadership, and that's just not effective anymore today. We see these people in all different layers of our job sites, but particularly superintendents, very difficult job, kind of the old school leadership. And some of the things involved in that mentality are, that just not only these statements, but also the mentality, my way or the highway. You have to do things a certain way or it's not acceptable. Everyone's replaceable. If the numbers aren't there, then ... It's not only do they say these things, but they think this way. I don't care what it takes, get it done. How does that work in a safety culture? I've heard that before. or the safety guy isn't here, what are you worried about? Safety is everyone's responsibility, not just safety professionals. And to get someone to move from point A to point B and change their behavior, the old school leadership is not effective anymore. So we want to talk about new school leadership techniques. How do we influence people? We talk about we instead of I. We are sympathetic listeners, empathetic listeners. We want to identify the problems and work on solutions. We don't find the problem and try to shift blame or point out someone or try to cause a problem for that team. That team dynamic has to be strong. When I had the accident a couple of weeks ago with my worker, we deploy, we react, we support the team, we have dialogue with all the workers, the future workers who are going to work there today, the GC, what our expectations are, we talk to OSHA, we show our team and our workers how we react in good times and bad. And we're sympathetic. What does that mean? It's frustrating. We recognize that frustration. We acknowledge that, we validate it. We'll try to make this better. And of course we make mistakes, everyone does. So we want to accept those and recognize that together we can make it better. That's the approach we have to take to safety. That gives every engaged person the opportunity to say something's unsafe on the job site. And that's what we're really looking for. Next, please. So how do you create trust and empathy? It sounds real easy. Just those words are thrown around like leadership and communication. And that's difficult. How do we influence people? How do we build that trust? How do we show that we're actually concerned about the people and we're willing to invest in the relationships to be able to talk about safety and move beyond compliance? And John's going to tell us a little bit about the relationship between operations and safety and how that's in every aspect of a job. And we have to empower our workers to want to engage in that as effective leaders.
Thank you, Todd. One of the things that Todd and I have spent decades working on together is the safety programs that we see and through our trade associations and everything, is that we have found out that compliance gets us part of the way there, but most of the accidents that we see are almost always generated from some behaviors. And so understanding the behaviors, and I know there's been a tremendous amount of work in the safety fields of behavior-based safety programs and things like that, where they're trying to get into habits and looking at how things are done. One of the things that Todd and I've noticed and caused us to kind of want to really put this process together is the concept of symbiotic safety. And that is that safety excellence cannot be achieved without operational excellence. Because you can make sure that you are completely compliant, that everyone's bought in and everything is happening, but most of the time it is some type of operational problem that leads to safety stress and things that happen. And so if we just try to create safety excellence and we don't have operational excellence, then we're kind of putting the cart in front of the horse. We have to make sure that those two work together. They cannot be separate. You can't have an incredible operating program and not have safety as a part of it, because that's not really a great operational program. You can't have a great safety program that doesn't have a great operational program, because they're going to interact to each other. Again, operational excellence, though, when I use that term, I don't mean that we're making a lot of money or that we're working really fast or that it means that we're doing it correctly the whole time. And again, to go back to some of my favorite football analogies, if you've ever seen college football, you certainly know who Nick Saban is, who's coached 7 national championships in the last 14 years. And there are many times, if you watch an Alabama game, you either like them or you hate them, but you got to respect the process that he has. And one thing that's different about Nick Saban is that he can watch his team score a touchdown and be just fuming mad because he knows the play wasn't run well. He knows that they got lucky, and because they're faster and because they're stronger, they were able to outrun and outmaneuver their opponent, but they still did not operate in an efficient and an excellent way. And there's going to be a day that there's players that are just as fast and just as strong, and it's not going to work. So his insistence on operational excellency runs over into how they play all the time. And to give you a good example, in Todd's story that he's been telling this morning, a hammer drill fell 140 feet and landed and hit a man in his arm. If that hammer drill would have fell 6 inches to one side, it would have made a really loud noise. It would have scared a worker really bad. It would have been a near miss incident that we would have spent some time talking about. If it would have fell 6 inches to the other side, it would have hit the man in his head and we would have a fatality to deal with. The exact same failure from an operational standpoint of having a lack of communication that allowed crews to be in an area they're not supposed to be in. That communication breakdown in the operations and sequencing of how the work is supposed to be done, that breakdown caused an incident to happen. In this case, the outcome was really not related to the incident at all. It just happened to be that it hit his arm. It didn't hit his foot, it didn't hit his head, and it didn't miss him by 6 inches. So many times the outcome of safety failures or operational failures may lead to no negative consequence at all, but they're still failures. And so focusing in on these failures and making sure that we have an operationally excellent system relieves a tremendous amount of pressure from the safety program. One of the things that we've talked about in here in Central Texas a lot is pushing the concept that there should not be an operations manual and a safety manual. There's no need to talk about how to do our business. And then, oh, by the way, there's another book over here on the side that says this is how we should do it safely. It all should be integrated, that when we do our work, whatever it is that your task is, whatever it is that your work is, that the operation of it should include being able to do it safely. And then we should be focusing on how did we work our plan. So the old adage of create a great plan and then work the plan is extremely important. And that's what creates the opportunity to have true safety excellence, because you got to have the operational excellence along with it. So safety not only has to be concerned about the safety compliance and the safety program, but it also has to be concerned about quality, productivity, and cost. And that sounds like they're competing sometimes. And there's some of the old school thought that safety and productivity are in competition with each other. We can either do it safe or we can do it fast, but we can't do it both. Well, my contention and Todd and I's contention is that in order to have a truly safe job, you're going to have to do it right the first time and not have rework, because some of the most difficult safety processes in the world is when we have to go back and do something unusual, unplanned, and unprepared for. If we have to do rework, then it's probably going to have a lot of stress on that from a productivity and from a cost standpoint, from a schedule standpoint. So all these stressors make it much more difficult to actually work safe. So when we have these unplanned things like rework, or if we have productivity issues where we're not getting things done in the timely manner and the schedule is behind, if you ask any plaintiff attorney who wants to sue somebody for an accident, the first questions that they always ask is, how was the schedule? Was there pressure on the schedule to make people work faster? The reason they ask that question is because it absolutely does have an effect. Whether we want it to or not, it stresses people. And when people are stressed, like we talked about earlier, they're afraid of being a failure. They're afraid of not doing what they were tasked to do, or spending too much money than they were allowed to spend, or whatever. Those stresses work on people. And whether we want it to or not, it's going to have an effect on their decisions. And so we have to make sure that from a safety standpoint, if we're just as concerned about quality, productivity, and cost as we were on safety, then we're going to help eliminate these stresses and these pains that come in to make the safety program work even more difficult. So in conclusion, just want to kind of wrap up. We've taken up our time here a little bit, but just want to wrap up and conclude that what we talked about today is that no longer is safety just an ambassador for OSHA. It's a much bigger process than just thinking about compliance, that we got to get true commitment from people. And that commitment requires a buy-in at all levels to really understand what people are afraid of, what are they motivated by, and what do they really, really want. And then safety needs great leadership. We have to be able to understand how to talk to people and how to lead them towards a path that creates success and creates an ease for safety to flow through. And then we talked about the concept that safety and operations have to work together. They cannot be independent. They can't be separate from each other, and they're never in competition. They work together. You can't have a great operational program that's unsafe, and you can't have a great safety program that makes no money and always comes in late. So they really thrive on each other in order to work safely. So with that, that's kind of all that we had to say. And Todd and I have been talking an awful lot. And if there's any questions or comments or anything like that, we'd like to address those now.
Glenn Davidson. I'll say one thing. I think the message is very crisp and clean, and I think it's well taken. I will say that safety attitude on site is a big issue with some of these subcontractors. If there's an attitude, if you can't change it, you just need to get the guy off site. Because if you can't get with the program, he's going to cause problems sooner or later. But good message. We appreciate it. That's
a good point, Glenn. There's a lot of companies that would love to have unsafe workers, so let them go there.
Yeah, 10-4.
Don't cause stress on people.
I would agree. I really appreciate the message because the way you've laid it out, it's a great reminder to all of us of the various pressures that all of the people on a project at every different level face. So many different pressures, and the importance to focus on these key concepts the way you've laid them out. It makes it really easy, and it's something that it's I think people can easily implement. You know, it's the way it lays out. It's
another thing to consider on that with leadership making those changes is from the worker's perspective. How are they taking this? How does this appear to them? Is it really the way you intend it to come out? So that's sort of something that causes conflicts that are sometimes not necessary. If there's better communication outside of safety issues, it can help improve safety as well.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Todd and I have spent too much time together because I was thinking the exact same thing there. Is that if any of you have people that report to you, if I would sum it up as the easiest one sentence way to create this buy-in is be extremely careful how you react to bad news. If somebody comes to you to tell you bad news and you react to the bad news, that person is going to interpret that you're reacting to them. And nobody wants to be the guy that pisses off the boss. So be careful, and somebody has bad news to you, always accept it graciously. Appreciate the fact that thanks for coming and telling me this. This could really escalate and have been a problem. I appreciate you having the courage to come tell me this now, so that in time that we can deal with it. You're gonna as a manager, you're gonna be able to do a lot more if you are very careful about how you respond to the way that people come talk to you, because they're, whether you like it or not, they're watching you like a hawk. See how you react, what makes you mad, what makes you happy, and those kind of things.
You know, that is such a powerful message that extends to all aspects of work, of which safety is a positive consequence of that kind of leadership behavior. I was literally, right before this call, was having a discussion with one of our long-term construction superintendents who's been on every project, has, you know, dealt with all the tough safety issues, quality, customer, people. And he said that he approaches every interaction with every person with a sense of respect and consideration, and gives everybody that that safety, that safe place to be themselves and to be their best. And when you approach people in a reactive way, an aggressive way, a bullying way, they shut down, they pull back, they that you lose their engagement instead of getting their engagement. And so, the statement that you just made, John, I think is so powerful for all of us to remember. We get into that mode of finding blame. Who's responsible? Who's at fault? Why did you do it? We are going to beat the crap out of this situation until we get the result that we want. And what we always get is we just get everybody just, they smile and file, they nod, and then they go and they hide. And, because who wants to be bullied, right? I mean, you want some compassionate engagement and giving people that. And of course, like Glenn said, I think get them off the job if they're no good. But we can do it respectfully and gracefully and compassionately.
Sure.
So.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Or
A lot of quiet people. We got a lot of people on this call, and they're being really quiet.
Tends to happen sometimes.
Good afternoon. My name is George. I have a comment.
Yes.
I think you guys were excellent. Let me tell you something. I'm what you call old school, okay? And you guys shined a light on me that was dim, that was flickering for the last 8 weeks. I mean, in a nutshell, you guys helped me in so many ways that now when I go back and I experienced, okay, let me start over. I have a couple of temps that work for me, and these guys are attitudinal. There's all kind of situations from day to day, and it's been tough on myself personally. But with this freaking seminar you guys did today, you know what? I'm ready. I'm ready for tomorrow. You know what I mean? I'm going to approach these guys, smiles and despite the negative feedback in the vulgar language that they share, I'm just going to suck it up and keep it moving. But what's going to happen is one of you gentlemen mentioned the fact that once it comes to a head, they're going to get recycled. I'm going to get rid of them because one bad seed, I had 6 temps at one time, and there was just one bad seed that messed up my whole flow for that week. And man, I'm gonna tell you something. I'm lost for words. Thank you very much for your time, Natalie. You're doing an excellent job, and gentlemen, I like to see one more. You got a part 2 to this?
George, I'd like to give you something more than just falling back on getting rid of the guy, because you might trade down and get even more problems with that.
Yes, sir.
Proactive communicative approach would be to create a common purpose.
Okay.
He wants his job, you want him. So you come up with a statement. It's called a contrasting statement to build that trust, because you have to create dialogue, and you do that through trust. That statement is, I want you to be here, and I don't want to have any more problems. Do you want to be here? Because I want you to be here. Don't you want a job? I need the job done. I got to get somebody to do it. Aren't we in agreement that you can do the job and that I need you? And if you can create that mutual purpose to start with, then you go forward, and it's a little bit easier once you've created some common ground instead of just kind of sitting there slamming heads together and threatening. It's better to start off with something that you agree to. He wants his paycheck, you want the job done. You guys have something in common, and then work from there.
Excellent.
And if
Very
that doesn't
good.
work, you always have the fallback, but then you're going to get the next guy, and maybe he's the same or worse.
True.
And when other people see you that way, you may bring some of those other people in line, and they may be more helpful and more communicative with you to not be fighting with you all the time.
Okay. Great. That sounds great, man. You guys are good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, obviously, you're an intelligent man. I appreciate that.
Well, sir, I do my best. It's just that, I've been around. I worked for as a temp for 8 years myself, So I have, what do you call it, the empathy for my fellow temps, because I've been in that position before.
Sure.
But when I give you simple instructions and I walk you through and demonstrate what needs to be done, and when I leave you alone and come back and there's mistakes and then there's rework that has to be done, I'm not a happy guy, bro.
Okay, well, George, we can also fix that. You got me going here, but the most basic thing dealing with directives comes from the military. It's the brief back. You tell somebody to do something, and if you're that lacking in trust, you have to say to that person, tell me what I just told you to do. Sometimes you get a pretty surprising response that they didn't really get it. So before you multitask, before you give them a big, broad, fix the problem, I'll come back next week, you better say, tell me what I just told you to do. And you may not be getting across the point you need to. So that's a technique that will help clarify to get kind of some momentum and success there. And then you can make it a more general directive or more broad.
I see.
But start with the one task brief back, it's called.
Okay. So in other words, baby steps, kid gloves. Is that the summation of it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Create some success with that guy, and then you can expand. But you don't start off with 5 tasks at the same time and get them done as soon as you can. I mean, it's got to be really simple. And then you go, okay, good job. Now I want you to do this. What did I just tell you to do? Sometimes you got to work that with people that just aren't getting it, or once again, okay, get rid of them, but give them a chance.
I see. You know what? We could talk all day about. I mean, right before you guys go, let me get to sum up what you just mentioned as far as tasks. You know, when I say I'm dealing with temps, I got 2 guys that's 45 years old and one is 52. They're hired as skilled laborers, but yet there's no freaking skill. You know, it's you know what? All right.
That's a temp problem right there too.
Yeah, maybe. It sure is, bro.
You have
That's
to set
exactly
a different standard for that temp. Maybe you need to have some specifics listed as the qualifications for that worker, and just say, I need this guy to be able to do this, this, and this, and give him a tryout. I'm gonna try him for 2 days, 3 days. If it doesn't work out, I need somebody else.
Okay.
That'll put pressure on that temp agency to vet them a little bit better.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, sir. All right. Sounds good. You know what? I really appreciate your time. I'm sorry for taking up too much time for anybody else that has any more questions, but I'm good. Very good day. Nice way to end the day for me. Thank you. Very good.
Thank you,
George. Hey, George, you've done a great job of really connecting the dots of what the real issues that people face. And, you know, I think if you needed to reach out to somebody to help you, you know, figure out how to communicate with some of those temps and those teams, I saw when I was at Camp Lejeune, there was a health and safety leader there, Katrina, who was really phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yo, boy, you hit the nail on the head right there, bro.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
She has a great way of communicating with all people. And if you're, you know, you would imagine if you're on her crew, you're going to do whatever she wants because she's got that kind of motivation, right?
I agree 100%, sir. Very good example.
Yeah.
So as a matter of fact, thank you, man, because she's back in Camp Lejeune, and I'm gonna go see her tomorrow just for a little motivation. That's very good.
Bring her in as a guest. Bring her in as your guest speaker.
Man, let me tell you something. She done spoke in the past for Camp Lejeune, and she lays it out layman terms, but she gets to the point, and it is what it is when it comes to Trina, man. That's great. Very good example.
I think she should be the mayor of that base.
She's got my vote. Definitely got my vote.
Hey,
thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
George and Paul, I want to add something in. This is Rick Ebel. I've been on jobs where we've had trade unions coming in, and basically, you get the different workforces coming in that aren't really part of the company culture, ECC company culture. And one of the things that we've done on those sites is during the tailgate sessions, we've had the trades like each week talk about what they saw that was most bothersome or most hazardous in their job for the previous week or, the previous period of time. And each time, like the truckers would get up and they'd say, okay, we saw this, too many people walking close. And the next week, the mechanical guys may come up and say, well, we saw this, that, or the other. And it became almost like a way for the whole team to get together and give their viewpoint of the job from a hazard risk assessment. And it integrated, it invested them into the process. It almost became like a competition. We started throwing pizza parties at the end, with people who came up with the most, innovative idea or, prevented the most dangerous situation. We just had a safety committee that would evaluate that and throw a party at the end of the week or something like that. It was just a fun way to engage the different people in a team environment versus, maybe they're working for a temp agent or they're working for a union or something. They're thinking about the team safety, and it kind of set that culture.
Rick,
Thanks, clearly you're focused on the safety and not the health if you're focusing on a pizza party.
We can do hummus too, Paul.
Thomas.
No organic smoothie trucks. Come on.
Try that. We could try it.
Rick, you brought up a good point. There's two things that are extremely powerful, especially in male workers, and that's competition and ego. And when you can set up an ego system to try to make that competition kind of come in. This group over here is doing better than we are. We need to be better than that. This group, other people are more successful at this task than we are. We got to step up. It's embarrassing how easy men fall for that. The ego is just it just drives men crazy, and they if they feel like they're getting disrespected, if you're not paying them attention and you're hurting their ego, they're going to lash out, and they're going to be afraid of that, and they're going to fight back. But you'd be surprised if you really just kind of stop and think about how do I make this person feel good and excited, and what do they want to do? Competition and ego are huge drivers for construction.
Yeah, and on the flip side of the coin is listening to them too. Sure. If they come up with their idea and then suddenly they get a pizza or a carrot stick at the end of it, then they're saying, hey man, they're listening to me, and they listen to Joe, and maybe they'll listen to me next week. So that type of thing. There's a listening side on that flip side of that too.
And there's also a competition part of it, because other people in the crew saw that this person that had a great idea got rewarded. And this guy keeps getting rewarded, and I've never gotten rewarded for it. And I don't want to be the guy who doesn't get it. I've sat in a training class myself with an instructor who would ask questions, and whoever answered the question in the group, he would throw a little plastic fishing worm. It cost a nickel or a couple pennies, and it's really kind of worthless when you're sitting in a classroom. But it didn't take me long before I realized most of the people in the room had a plastic fishing worm, and I didn't. And I didn't want to be the guy to not get one. And I sat up in my chair and I started paying attention. And when I realized what was happening to me, I couldn't believe how powerful that competition and that ego was. That drive is, there's so many different ways to make it succeed. But
this is such an interesting conversation.
Vitrina.
Hey, how are you guys?
Great to hear from you.
Yes, you too. It's so funny that you would be talking about that, because we were actually talking about that here in Oregon. How validation, people want to be validated and feel important. And I used to give out candy at my previous project, and you would be surprised how big grown men are so happy to get a Tootsie Roll Pop. Or
I bring candy to my OSHA classes.
Seriously.
Gotta have
seriously. I mean, it's crazy to me. And I mean, they would really like be like, I got the safety question right. Can I have a you got candy? You got candy? At every site I would go to, and there would be somebody asking me, do you have candy? I thought you're the candy lady, right? And I'm the safety lady, but I do have candy, and I'll get. Do you know what your safety topic was today? Or, things like that. And it's so funny because it's really mental, because so many people didn't get validation as children. And it sounds funny, but it's really a mental thing. And for somebody to actually see you is important, to know that you're actually there, because sometimes you're just a number in the crowd. And it's so important for people to feel like they are being seen.
And it's positive reinforcement.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Thank you, Vadrina.
Absolutely.
I look forward to going to Vadrina's job sites just so I can get the Tootsie Roll. And I don't even eat Tootsie Roll.
I know we have a few more minutes left. Does anybody have any other comments or questions?
I'd just like to say thank you again to our representatives and to you, Miss Natalie, for putting on these great freaking seminars, man. This was cool, man. This is nice. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, George. I just have a quick question, John and Todd. So if you were to suggest, I know you had a lot of great suggestions today and provided us a framework. If we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into communication or kind of embedding these kinds of interactions within our culture, do you have any resources or suggestions that you would share with us that we can, pass around to everyone?
Yes, there's a book called Crucial Conversations that we use in our leadership class that is exactly what we're talking about here. George needs a copy as soon as possible.
Well, we can get that to George.
All right, that's exactly what he's talking about.
Great.
And I wouldn't be too ashamed to suggest there's a book called Symbiotic Safety that talks a lot about the communication and the leadership, about how to create what we've talked about today.
Wonderful. Yes, and I will be reaching out to you. And hopefully what we can do is for everyone on the call, we can pass around to different locations. If you're interested, just send me an email and I can make sure that you get a copy. So
I think
Sign me up, please.
I think Tom Gilbertson was trying to say something, but he was muted.
Oh, Tom?
Yeah. I just wanted to add that I've always found it important on projects to give the guys ownership of what you're trying to accomplish. In other words, talk to them about how to go about things, and incorporate some of their ideas into what you're trying to accomplish, and it goes a long way if everybody's pulling in the same direction. That's all I got.
Great point. The key to making that successful is making sure that you have the same goals in mind.
That's what we're trying to accomplish by doing that. It sure makes for a successful project, that's for sure.
And to add one other thing, I think it's so important to get buy-in at the beginning of projects, because a lot of times safety is, getting buy-in, just getting people to feel like they are part of the bigger picture. And that even safety people don't go out there as safety police. You know what I mean? Like trying to find something going wrong, but always looking for the good in what we see. And just catch somebody doing good, doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good point, Katrina. In my experience, it's been embarrassing how little positive reinforcement safety people give.
Mm-hmm.
When I find someone doing something that's notable on that level, I try to get out there immediately, compliment them, and give them a gift card to a Visa card or a Home Depot or a Walmart card. I kind of carry those with me, hoping to find that, and I give out a couple a month. Want to make it sure it's something substantial, but yet immediate. Because if you don't get that reinforcement out there quickly, it's kind of lost. But I've been able to do that in the last few months, and I've been keeping 3 of those cards with me at all times, hoping for those good things and being able to find them and recognize those people. They appreciate it.
Well, and not just recognition from the safety people, but recognition from senior management is key. That goes a long way too.
Yeah.
Well, that is so true.
And to be honest with you, for me, that's a great point, because even from when Paul Sabawal came to our job site in North Carolina, and him just even talking to me made me feel like, wow, I must really be important. I had just began working there, and you don't understand how it is just for people to, how important it is for people just to know that I'm here. You recognize that I am a part of the company, and even if I'm a subcontractor, that I'm here, that you really see me, and that I'm not just, another worker on the job or just another number. It's so important. He made me feel so important just by even talking to me.
Well, that's funny because I think Vitrina makes everybody feel important. So, it's hard to go anywhere in the world with her being unnoticed. Which is really back to that point that you made earlier, John, about, when you give people that respect and acknowledgement, and you really, it's like the Stephen Covey quote, kind of begin with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you want it to be like at the end? And then we all work towards that from the beginning.
Boy, that's a fundamental key to success. That should be one of the habits of highly successful people, but it is.
Right.
But absolutely, most people make decisions based on I kind of call it, they look in front of them for the next step to take, but they're only looking at the next few steps and not looking into the distance. Where do I want to be and how do I get to that point? Sometimes I have to overcome hard things initially to get to where I want to be. But if I just take the easy path, I'll never really get where I want to be. And that's a great point. Paul, just to reiterate what they were saying, I had an experience at my company where 3 people got promoted. And I got to talk to them afterwards, and none of them mentioned a promotion. They didn't mention any kind of pay raise. They didn't mention anything. All they talked about and walked on their toes that day was the president of the company took me out to lunch. And that's all they got a different title. They probably got some more money, but all they cared about was that the president of the company took me out to lunch. And that just made their year, Yeah. That feedback from a supervisor is huge. And it doesn't have to be the president of the company. It's whatever level of responsibility you have. That positive feedback, if it's truly for positive work, is. My son called me out not too long ago. I told him I was proud of him, and he said, "For what?" I didn't think about that. I was just trying to be nice. So it can't be flippant. It has to be real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we can learn so much from each other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always a blessing when you get to interact with, folks that you can learn from. And so I'm sure that in that example that you gave, the president, when he went out to lunch with those people, I guarantee he learned more than, or as much and from that interaction than they did.
Sure.
So more of an opportunity for him too.
Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. I just want to say thank you both, John, Todd, for great presentation and leading a great discussion for us. We really, really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch, and we just very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Well done. Well done.
Thanks.
Hang in there, George.
Thank you, gentlemen. I will. Don't worry. I'm not